A reading from the Gospel according to Mark. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials, named Jairus, came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please come, lay your hands on her, that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed upon him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. He felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to Jesus, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While he was speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside, except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they ridiculed him. Then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him and entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that they were utterly astounded. He gave strict orders that no one should know this, and said that she should be given something to eat. The Gospel of our Lord.
To touch and be touched. These are movements we witness in the twofold story of healing in today's Gospel. We are now on the 13th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and the liturgy ushers us to encounter God who by His love upholds and saves life. He is a God who did not make death, nor rejoice in the destruction of the living as expressed in the Book of Wisdom. He made us in His own image, formed, and destined us to live with Him forever. The stories of healing in the Gospel are proofs of this. God touches and He allows Himself to be touched in order to heal, restore life, and bring forth renewal. He is our God who is so in touch with our human reality, fragile and vulnerable to both physical and spiritual illnesses. In the Gospel, 2 women obtained healing. Interestingly, one was bleeding for 12 years and the other one was dying at the age of 12. Both received healing by touch. The woman, by touching the cloak of Jesus, stopped bleeding, which restored her life and dignity as daughter of Israel. The girl, whom Jesus took by the hand, was likewise restored to life. It is important to notice that the faith of both the woman and Jairus, the girl's father, as an essential factor in the healing process. Healing unfolded through the faith that moved the woman to touch Jesus' cloak and Jairus to approach Jesus, whom he pleaded to touch his dying daughter. This present pandemic has restricted us in many ways from physically touching one another. Physical distancing now becomes our way to touch each other's heart by our care and concern to keep everyone safe from the virus. Just as our Lord Jesus became poor in order to enrich us with every spiritual blessing, every gracious act of love, respect, care, and generosity we do has the capacity to touch the core of another being. Each one of us has been richly blessed and is capable to touch and be touched by love. In this time of crisis, may we open our hearts to every touching experience and make sense of God's presence in them. In turn, we also allow ourselves to be channels of the Master's touch. Finally, by our manifestations of goodness and charity, may we constantly reach out to touch other persons' lives.